Ladies and gents, by way of a very brief introduction, my name's Steve Bentley. I have a fairly interesting background in terms of what's brought me to be delivering this topic to you today. That I started my life in the military, where I've got a passion for all things performance, all things leadership and team related. Before moving into the commercial sector, where I worked in a variety of different roles, mainly sales and marketing within the brewing industry, and moved from there into the world of Coca Cola, where I spent 8 years again in a variety of different sales, marketing and commercial roles. And I got quite interested in what made the difference, what drove performance, what drove people and teams. So much so that around 8 years ago, along with a couple of other guys, we acquired a consultancy specialising in performance. And since that time, we've expanded the business, looking to work in a variety of different corporations, from huge global multinationals right through to small to medium-sized enterprises. We're working across the public sector also, and in the world of sport. And it's that led me to the piece of work that I'm going to share with you this morning, that I think has been invaluable, certainly in helping me with the teams across the various industries that I've worked with, but also our client base. And it's really about how do we maximize personal potential. The term that I fell across whilst reading from a couple of guys in the US, Jim Loehr and Tony Schwartz, who had done some interesting work around this. And they were exploring the difference between elite athletes and people working in the world of business. So if you like, anything from junior management right through to senior leadership. And when they explored this, it was quite interesting. If you think about it from an athlete's perspective, they will spend broadly 95% of their time in training. They will typically be surrounded by an army of people, from strength coaches, conditioning coaches, technical coaches, performance coaches. They will have sports massage therapists, physios, doctors at their beck and call. They will have managers, they will have agents. There is literally an army of people focused on getting the best out of their performance. Their execution is 5% of their time, broadly, and by execution, I mean competing at the Europeans, at the Worlds, at the Olympics. If you then flip that over to the world of corporate, you'll find that the typical manager, the typical executive in the corporate world, will spend probably 95% of their time, ideally, working at a peak performance level. If they're lucky, they will spend up to 5% of the time in training. And if they're lucky, if they're extremely lucky, they'll get a one-to-one from their line manager on a monthly basis. So how then do we manage to support these people to perform at 95% of their time, given the incredible demands that are now placed upon us in the modern workplace? Demands from our client base, demands from our teams, demands from our line management, demands from our shareholders, demands from general stakeholders. It's a pretty tough world in which we live, and therefore it's absolutely critical that we have a plan, that we have a strategy to enable ourselves to perform at such a level for such long and sustained periods of time. And if you have a look at the work that Jim Loehr and Tony Schwartz did, they come at it from quite an interesting perspective. They talk about the fact that effectiveness is really about managing energy rather than time. So energy, not time, is the fundamental currency of high performance, which is quite interesting because certainly every organisation that I've worked in has focused on time management programs, time management courses, but really, if you think about most managers in organisations, sure could improve their time management, we could all improve our time management, but ultimately, how are we doing with regards to our energy management? And there are a few principles within this. First of all, I'm a big fan of the leader as a role model. For me, it's all about role modelling. And Lauren Schwartz talks about the fact that we inspire or demoralize ourselves and others, first by how effectively we manage our own energy, and second by how we mobilize and renew the collective energy of those around us. So if you think about it from a leadership perspective, everything we say, everything we do, every thought we have, every action we make has an energy consequence. It will either give people energy or it will take energy away from them. It will either give ourselves energy or it will sap our own energy levels. So the first question that I'm usually asking when I'm working with leaders, either delivering programs or on a one-to-one basis, is how effectively do they manage their own energy and the energy of those around them. One of the principles that Lauren Schwartz talk about is the fact that because energy capacity diminishes both with underuse and overuse, we have to balance expenditure with intermittent energy renewal. This is absolutely critical in the workplace, where we are forever, almost, certainly with the advent of modern technology and smartphones and instant access and the demands of instant responses, we're forever being busy. And if we're not, for whatever reason, it's almost like we're feeling guilty that we have to be doing something. But the reality is with this, certainly from a management and leadership perspective, we have to be finding time to renew our energy. So the second principle talks about the fact that to build capacity, we have to push beyond our normal limits, training in the same systematic way that elite athletes do. And this is about stretch. This is quite interesting for me because this is about stretch for ourselves and stretch for our people. It's not stretch where, if you think from a sporting perspective, typically athletes will ordinarily, when strength training, exercise muscles to failure, to fatigue. The muscles then rebuild and come back stronger. And that's the idea with this, except we're not ideally encouraging our people to be exercising to fatigue, to working to fatigue. We're knowing each individual's boundaries, we're knowing each individual's limits, and we're knowing our own limits. And with that in mind, we can work to those limits, push them, and then have some downtime to let them recover. And this can be anything from people who have a fear of public speaking, who have a fear of stepping up and presenting. They're great at the work, but not great at presenting things. So it's really understanding our people and how far we can encourage them before bringing them back down to relax, recuperate, and then go back in again. So it's really a process that is about really finding time to understand and know your people well. And the third principle is that we have 4 separate but interrelated sources of energy. And I'll go through these one at a time just to explore each in isolation. The physical energy is about how we breathe and what we eat. So the interaction between oxygen and glucose. And this is absolutely critical. This, from an executive's perspective, is when we do have to either burn the midnight oil, when we do have to get that project out, deliver that new product development, whatever it is that we're doing that is really forcing us, we're working on a big deal. When life's pretty busy, we're dashing from meeting to meeting, we're maybe driving a lot of miles in the car, we're literally flying around the building, catching up with as many people as we possibly can to execute whatever the plan is. It's that piece around being able to physically cope with that. It's running up the flight of stairs and not taking 10 minutes to recover. Because your body's using oxygen and glucose efficiently and effectively, you're ready. When you walk in the meeting room, you are ready. You are ready to go. You are on your game, as the athletes would say. And this incorporates a variety of different things. This might be hydration. We know the importance of hydration. You don't see any athletes out there now without taking hydration with them at all times. We have hydration in most classrooms, or certainly corridors within the schools and colleges of the land now, because we know how important it is for performance to remain hydrated. The second element of this is sleep, and there's been a huge amount of research about the importance of sleep and how our sleep is absolutely vital to give us energy, and it's important that we know how much sleep we need. Sure, we can survive when we need to on anywhere between 4 and 6 hours sleep a night, and I think we've probably all been there when working on that deal till the early hours. However, what the experts are telling us is that typically we need anywhere between 7 or 8 hours. That's individualized, so we need to know how many hours sleep deliver the right mindset and the right levels of energy for the day ahead. So 7 or 8 hours sleep, but it's very personalized, and what's important is that we're checking in with ourselves first thing in the morning, just to take that moment to think, right, how do I feel? How many hours sleep have I had? And do I need any more or any less going forward? And finally, the recovery break every 90-20 minutes. Again, this is pretty important in the workplace. Typically, we'll find that we're in first thing in the morning, we're opening up the email, and our nose is in the email, and we don't really let up typically until such times as we have an interruption or we're diving away for a meeting. What's important is to give our brain a break with the recovery breaks, ideally every 90 minutes, to get out, to take a walk around, to suck. The second energy is emotional energy, and emotional energy is about how we access positive emotions. So here, it's really about when the going gets tough for whatever reason, when we're making the mistakes that inevitably, if we're doing things differently, we're going to do. If things go wrong, if things go awry, if that curveball arrives, then we have the ability to manage ourselves. We have the ability to bring ourselves back to the mental state that we need to be at in order to be performing effectively. So with this, it's about self-confidence, self-esteem, and empathy. And again, all the psychology suggests that we can develop each of these. It's also an ability to manage our inner voice. There's some really interesting work being done in the UK around this, where certainly in terms of athletic prowess, we're now down to literally milliseconds separating athletes. So we have been working significantly in the field of sports psychology and psychiatry to enable athletes to take the mental edge. A guy called Dr. Steve Peters has done some really interesting work around this, where he talks about, using the analogy of the chimpanzee, talks about chimpanzee inside our head that's sole aim in life is to derail us. And that's what's causing the inner voice. It's the chimpanzee that talks to us when we're about to get up to a presentation, and he's telling us that we're no good at this, we're going to forget our slides, we're going to not connect with the audience, people are going to be judging us, and we know half of that's nonsense, it's completely irrational. So the emotional energy is about our ability to deal with our chimp, the ability to be able to put our chimp in the cage and manage ourselves. And that's what high performers do. High performers will realize that when they are feeling uncomfortable, when their emotional energy is sapping for whatever reason, if that's pre-meeting nerves, pre-deal nerves, whatever it is, that they are able to manage that effectively and readjust the mindset, interpreting it as the readiness to perform rather than anything that they should be worried about. The third energy is mental energy. And this is quite close to physical. There's some overlap here with physical energy. And mental energy is about our ability to focus on what's important. With all the noise that we get in organizations now through digital media, through the bombardment of messages on a literally almost a second by second basis, it's our ability to cut through the noise and focus on the stuff that makes the difference. Again, another really interesting piece of work by a guy called Ian Price in the UK, who's written a book called Activity Illusion, about how organizations and people within organizations are allowing their technology to manage them rather than the other way around. And so this is really about being very, very clear on objectives, being very, very clear about what it is you're there to deliver, being very, very clear on the stuff that makes the difference to you, your team, and your organization, and blocking everything out, whether that's turning off email, or whether that's just locking yourself away for specific periods of time that just allow you to really focus hard on the stuff that's going to make a difference. So tools to achieve some of this around preparation, it's about that visualization, it's about positive self-talk, so some linkages here with the emotional energy, and time and technology management. There's also an awful lot of evidence now talking about the link between physical exercise stimulating mental energy, and for those people out there who do find time to do the physical energy, they know, we get significant amounts of benefit from that, from our mental state. The fourth energy is core energy, or sometimes known as spiritual energy, and this is about really understanding and knowing what you stand for, what your core personal values are, and once you know what your core personal values are, then it's about aligning your life around your core personal values. So about being true to yourself and those around you. And everything suggests that when you are very clear about your personal values, when you know who you are and what you stand for, then your decision making just becomes so much easier. You don't have to go through the agonizing internal debate about making calls, because you make decisions that are in line with your value set. So they are the four energies. And by working on those four energies, then ideally, once we've got to think about them as four different tanks, if your tanks are topped up, then you're going to be, certainly if you're not at peak performance, you're not going to be very far away from peak performance. The other thing about managing your energy, work-life balance is absolutely critical. There are 6 key things to this about getting that work-life balance right. So sure, we want work. Work gives us a sense of fulfillment. It gives us a sense of purpose. When I work with people and ask them around what's important, family and friends comes on every single response that I have. So that stuff's important. But ironically, if people are talking about family and friends being at the core of their values, quite often these are the same people who, when challenged, are in the office till 9 and 10 o'clock in the morning. So we have some really interesting debates about how we manage that, how we juggle our value set, how we juggle our priorities. What's important and often very difficult to get is that me time, is that time for self. So whether your interest is around, whether it's cooking, whether it's gardening, whether it's cycling, whether it's walking the dog, whatever it is, we have to find that time. And again, there's some really interesting stuff being produced now about, certainly from a conceptual perspective, where our conceptual thoughts come in, and it's usually when we're away from the bombardment of messages, when we're away from all the activity that's going on through the demands of work, and that's usually when we are relaxing somewhere, when we're doing the stuff that we enjoy doing. That's usually when the fresh creative thinking can pop in. Quite often for a lot of people it's about community. People are talking much more these days about putting back into the community and finding time to either give or work with charities. So a variety of different ways, and what we have to think about is of this stuff, how much of each block of this am I devoting my time to, and have I got the balance right? And a little exercise in which to do this is pick out what's key to you, identify what's key to you, and then redraw it in terms of what your aspiration is. Ideally what you'd like to have before having a look at what you've currently got, and then you can build your plan in order to make sure that you are delivering exactly the life that you want to be living. And finally, for those who are familiar with the emergenetics model, each of the different thinking styles plays to managing energy in a very different way. We have some great stuff to draw on with each different thinking style. So a few just sort of tips and tools here as to how we can do this. So for those, for the analytical preference, it's really about researching that development opportunity. The analytical preference is usually pretty good at using things like reflection logs to record findings and thoughts and progress to do the monitoring. It's usually pretty good at using facts and data. So doing all that research piece, then to use it to create a plan and then tracking progress against that plan. If we're using the structural part of our brain, then typically we'd be committing all elements of the plan to the calendar. Again, part of that process tracking piece, tapping into people with other thinking styles, trying out elements of the plan and tweaking as we go. So understanding that sometimes we might get this right, sometimes we might not, and that's absolutely fine. We tweak it as we go. But also using the weekends for preparation. Some of the downsides of that busy week is that we forget. This stuff goes by the by when we're answering urgent emails, picking up the calls, and dealing with the day-to-day crises that we find in the workplace. So using the weekends, if it's things like physical energy, physical energy might be difficult from the food perspective, because I might be, as a salesperson, spending 20, 30,000 miles on the road. So I'm forever stopping at garages to refuel and grabbing the chocolate bars, or I'm stopping at fast food outlets. And, well, there's a way around that. There's a way around with preparation, preparing your food for the week, carrying fruit and nuts in the back of your car, the healthy stuff that we need that avoid you having to almost impulse or panic buy. And the other opportunity with that structural part of the brain is the ability to stay focused. So once I've got the plan, once I've got the goal, then I stick to that, and I don't waver off it. With the social part of the brain, some of the tips here are engaging with others who are experts. So enjoy engaging with people who maybe have some experience, or for you are role models in this particular area. People typically with a preference for social thinking might also want to join groups of people chasing similar goals, whether that's fitness, whether it's joining the local cycling club, whether that's about the gym, whether it's about spin classes, whether indeed it might be a Weight Watchers or a swimming world, whatever it is, but with other people might well be a great way of getting you motivated. As is finding a buddy to peer coach with, and checking in with yourself on a regular basis to see how you are doing, not just in terms of your progress, but how are you feeling. And the final one from a social perspective is thinking about getting feedback from other people, but people who will give you honest feedback in terms of how you are, rather than maybe what you want to hear. And finally, that conceptual part of the brain is usually pretty good at visualizing what success looks like. It's certainly within the world of athletics now. Visualization is a key training strategy, either going through the race, going through the start, going through the finish line, visualizing yourself on the podium, visualizing the clock of the time you want to deliver. It's a pretty powerful tool out there on it. So, and it's the conceptual part of the brain that is usually the bit that's useful for that visualization. Using that creativity that comes with conceptual thinking to think of new and different ways to achieve your goal, and making sure that whether this is it's physical, making sure that you have variety in your solutions. That conceptual part of the brain will want to be doing things differently. It will be stimulated by variety, so it's important that we ensure we build that into any plan that we have across developing any of the energies. And finally, having a nose around different books, just to increase your knowledge on whatever it is you're wanting to develop, any one of those 4 areas that you're wanting to develop. So folks, that's it from me. There's a piece around corporate athleticism. Any further reading, then I've named a couple of books there. On Form by Jim Loehr, Tony Schwartz is a useful read, as is The Chimp Paradox by Dr. Steve Peters, The Game Plan by Dr. Steve Bull, and Activity Illusion by Ian Price. Thanks for listening.